So on GAS, I know this is a totally new thing to you, right? I will run through with you all this aspect with a couple of important activities so that you have confidence in building out your web app. And as I shared with you earlier, the last bit of the SSL, you will have to figure out and try it on your own. So in terms of materials, you definitely have to have a Google account and your MKR Wi-Fi 1010 ready for this week lab. So the first thing, how to get started, right? In my lecture notes, I mentioned before, go into Google Drive, click on the more, all right? And you should be able to locate the Google App Script. If not, then you type script.google.com on a web browser. This will bring you to the GAS landing page. Once you are in, all right, how do you get started? You can create a new script, all right? Once you start off with a new script, you can change the title, right? You can change to any name. In terms of naming, it's more for us to recognize. And then within the file itself, this is the file that contains your GAS script. Your script is here. Okay, and your script, you can create a functions. And in this case, I want you to change the function name to my greetings. Doing this, all right, and typing this line 2 is just to do a simple text logging. Okay, what is this text logging? If you were to run and execute these standalone apps, it would have a response. The response for this particular line 2 will be presented in the execution log. How do you bring out the log? There is a button for you to click on. Now, to help you relate to what you have done in the past, this execution log is like your serial monitor. So you can do debug message as you develop your GAS, and you can use this part to help you check, are you receiving the correct data? Are you able to do a stop check on your codes and so on? All right, so in short, execution log like a serial monitor for you to check back on your program, and in this case, your GAS. There are other functions for you to use to save, to run your script, and this is your display, and you can set different functionality, all right? Toggling on your serial monitor, so-called, all right? Okay, with this, I hope that you would then have a quick understanding on how to start off, create a new GAS script, and execute it as a standalone. Okay, now that you have finished activity A, what you need to do is to extend that knowledge of a standalone app into a web app. So to create a web app, simply you would have to change the function do get. All right, so here you notice that there's no input parameter. Therefore, this is the so-called simple app for you to see and experience how you can deploy, how you can interact with your web app. All right, so you create a new script using the plus sign and follow these instructions. All right, how do you go about deploying? Remember, web app need to be deployed before you can test. Why do you need to deploy? Because you need the URL. All right, you need the URL. So you can choose new deployment. Under new deployment, select web app. Okay, finally, select the permission. So here you must allow anyone to use, because here the anyone refers to including your MKR devices. Therefore, you must choose this to be made available to anyone. After that, click on deploy. After you deploy, where is the URL? All right, you have to go into manage deployment. Go back to the active deployment. From here, you will see the web app URL. Okay, it is a long string of text, and you have to copy. Right, make use of the copy function, and then you can paste it onto your web browser and run your tests. Okay, so activity B is to let you kickstart with deployment of a web app. Right, there are some questions. So of course, these questions we'll run through in class. And then part C or activity C, this is where it extends to the point where you capture web client inputs, right? You're going to capture in your web client inputs using the E notation. In fact, you can use any other alphabet. Here we are using E because it's a convention in most of the tutorial and textbooks, they use E. So I'm using E also. So if you use F here, then of course it's F dot parameter. All right. So let's get back to the E. So when you put E, when you try to send over using your web browser, make sure you use the question mark to segregate the URL and your data, right? Anything after the question mark refers to your input parameters in the form of a variable name and variable data, right? So this bit I've mentioned in the lecture notes. So if you were to do the same after deployment, so remember to deploy. If you don't deploy, then you will not have the latest features of the get parameters functions. So after deploying, or after you have made the modification, after deploying, use the new URL and then run the test using your browser and then observe, right? Observe that the data really indeed comes in. So this part, I want you to try it for yourself to understand the development steps involved and see the data coming in front of you. Right, so this is the part for you to just try. Okay, I'll just move on as it is. You can make a few changes. Earlier, we are playing with just one data. If you are having more data sets, you have learned this before with ThinkSpeak, you use a ampersand or the and symbol to add in new parameters. So earlier, we are only sending one data, which is name. Next, in this particular slide, we are talking about adding a second parameter called age. Okay, so how would you then capture two data so that you can present the results or to have a callback to your client so that the client can read these data sets? Okay, once you are done with this, then we want to extend your knowledge about the ability to capture multiple data from your client. It is time for you to do data storage. So how do you do data storage? First of all, you must have a Google Sheet ready. So if you don't have, create a new one and call it IoT Sheets. And the second thing that you need to do is to share. Because in Google Drive, any documents that you have, if you want it to be accessible by others, you have to share it, even with your own Google Sheets. Even for your own GAS script. So the GAS automation that we have been talking about will also need that permission to be provided to the GAS script so that the GAS, your GAS script can then access your Google Sheets. All right, so this sharing is critical and you must allow. Okay, once you allow, like I have shared in class or in the lecture notes, these are the 3 steps to first of all store your URL, which is your Google Sheets URL. Secondly, to open your Google Workbook using the URL function. Finally, access your Google Sheets. Okay, so this part you have to follow as it is. And finally, in line 9, this is to append. Only when a web client sends over the data, with this data, your GAS will append the new data set, the name and the age into your Google Sheets. Okay, so here I think there are some questions for you to follow through. I leave it to you to check it out yourself. Okay, finally, now that you have learned how to create web app with input data, and web app that sends and update your Google Sheets, we are going to take a step back, all right, to look at how you can then customize your communication with ThinkSpeak. So here we are going with, wow, okay, I say again, we are going without the ThinkSpeak library. So I want you to run through this activity E as a steps to understand what goes on with a TCP connection. Okay, so you are going to use, I will call it a low level web client repeating example code. All right, this is an example code because in this example code, there's a HTTP request. And this is the part that I want you to go through to learn about how to make use of this low level function. Okay, and then create your respective what's that called, the header file. These are all the header file required to communicate to ThinkSpeak server. All right, you need to get your get function. This is exactly what you will see in the API tab. Right, this is what you get to see in the API tab. And there are some header to mention about the host name, the user agent, and so on. So this is where additional information is required to get connected with ThinkSpeak server. Okay, I would like you to run through this example code and see for yourself. These are the data when every time you talk to a server, in this case ThinkSpeak, you are sending this many information to ThinkSpeak, and ThinkSpeak will reply with this many information. Therefore, why TCP is heavy? Because there are a lot of text that is being exchanged between server and client. And come to think about it, we are only sending one field data to ThinkSpeak, and we are spending so much text as part of the protocol, right? And therefore, this is using a lot of resources. And of course, the example code should work if you have set up correctly and you are able to send the incremental data or counter to ThinkSpeak. Going through activity E will definitely help you in the next activity, right? Some of this question we'll go through in class, so I'll skip. Activity E lets you understand the TCP connection to a server. For activity F, this is the part where it becomes a bit tricky. The earlier activity E is using a non-secure or not secure connection to ThinkSpeak. And ThinkSpeak accept this because they are for IoT, they feel that having secure connection is not necessary. But when we are trying to communicate to Google server, then we cannot use the earlier example code. We must use this Wi-Fi SSL client, which I mentioned in the lecture, because Google is very stringent. If you come in not in a secure manner, they reject the connection, right? Therefore, you must use this to communicate with Google server, right? Google server. Before you talk to Google server, here I would like you to try and connect to ThinkSpeak using secure connection. Okay, so in this example, there are a couple of things, new things for you to look into. How do you upload root certificates? How do you go about including some of the server that your MKR, here what you are trying to do here is to let your MKR have the certificates on board as part of your script, so that when it communicates securely with the server, in this case, in this activity F, will be to communicate with ThinkSpeak, then it will know that it has the relevant and the correct certificates. Right, this is part of the encryption methods. And then finally, if things goes well, you will probably be able to get this response from serial monitor. So again, there is nothing different comparing to using non-secure versus secure method, because we are still sending data to ThinkSpeak for update into the respective channel. What is difference between secure and non-secure is that behind the scene, there is encryption going on. All right, before you send over, your data has been encrypted. Once the encrypted data lands onto the ThinkSpeak server, they will do the decryption to find out what exactly you're trying to send over. Okay, so this part is just getting you to gain the experience. Once you are able to communicate through secure connection with ThinkSpeak, then it comes to your group project work, right? As part of your group discussion, I would like you to then explore, right? How would you go about working with the GAS? Okay, so this bit is part of the Great Scope assignment. I will leave it to you to discuss and submit. And next week, I will compile and share your responses like what I did this morning.